So we're going to look at the male reproductive system for lab. In this we have both a model and a picture. This is a model with the sagittal section of the model. We're also going to have another part of the model that's going to have more of a 3D effect that's going to cover some things that you'll be able to see a little better. I'm going to start with a picture that will be used. So this picture is going to go over the parts of the male reproductive system. And so we start first with what is called the testes. The testes, or the testicles, or the male reproductive gland. And while they produce hormones, what we're going to talk about right now is the fact that they produce these special reproductive cells called sperm. And as they produce the sperm, that will be released and caught in this area called the epididymis. The epididymis is the start of a long tube, and it is specifically the epididymis that is in this outer structure called the scrotum. All right, the testes are going to be located outside of the body cavity in this area called the scrotum. And so the start of this long tube, which is called the epididymis, is found in the scrotum as well. Once this tube passes out and gets into the body cavity, now it will be called the ductus, or sometimes called vas deferens. So the ductus or vas deferens is a long tube, and it's going to come up and around the urinary bladder. All right, so this little hollow area here represents the hollow inside of the urinary bladder. Now, as the ductus or vas deferens comes around, it will meet the other ductus or vas deferens, because there will be two. There's two testicles and there's two ductus deferens that come around, and they join on the posterior area of the urinary bladder in a spot called the ampulla of the ductus deferens. Now, this word ampulla, if you remember, if we've talked about it before, ampulla simply means a larger than normal duct. And it's going to be generally where two or more ducts merge together, and for a brief period of time, it'll be larger than normal. So this little area right here is called the ampulla of the ductus or vas deferens. Now, there's another thing that's going to join in this area as well, and it is a little kind of like a gland, and it's called the seminal vesicle. This little part here that looks like this little sac in here, that is called the seminal vesicle. The seminal vesicle is going to produce semen, and you can see here they're going to join. The ductus, the ampulla of the ductus deferens and the seminal vesicle, they will join for a brief period of time here, and at that point, this section is called the ejaculatory duct. Now, the junction of the seminal vesicle and the ampulla of the ductus deferens is going to be right as this merges and joins and forms this ejaculatory duct, and it will be inside this thing called the prostate. So there's a gland right here called the prostate gland, and as the ampulla of the ductus deferens and the seminal vesicle join, they will enter into the prostate gland, and at that point, that duct is called the ejaculatory duct, and that's exactly what it does. It is it's basically the starting gate. So when the sperm is being created, it's going to back up to this point. The seminal vesicle is going to have semen waiting on it, and when it is time to get the semen out, when it's time to ejaculate, it will go out of the ejaculatory duct, and at this point, the ejaculatory duct is going to merge with the urethra, right? And that's going to carry the semen out. Now, the urethra is going to have several names. As it says here, this is a membranous urethra. There's going to be a part called the spongy urethra. I'm not worried about the different names from this point, from the urinary bladder here This is the urethra. So the urethra in the males has a dual role. It is part of the urinary system, but it's also part of the reproductive system because of the fact that the ejaculatory duct joins with it. But it's still called the urethra. Now the urethra is going to extend out. Along the way, there is a thing called a bulbourethral gland. I always have a hard time saying that. I'm not worried about it. You don't have to really, we're not going to label it on any model or anything for lab. Its job is to secrete mucus. But again, it's hard to see, and then on our model, it's not even there. So don't worry about that. What I do want to talk about is that this external structure is just simply called the penis. Now, the penis is going to have two types of tissue, two main types of tissue. One is called the corpus cavernosum, which is going to be on the top part, and it's actually going to have two portions to it. And then we're going to have the corpus spongiosum, which is on the bottom part. And you can kind of remember it's the spongiosum because this is what the urethra goes through. And the urethra, since it's mostly for the urinary system, and urine is mainly water, you can kind of remember sponges are mainly dealing with water. So the spongiosum is about, with the urethra, is about water. Now, another thing, and I venture not to say it, but when I was studying this, we learned that the corpus cavernosum is for erectile tissue. And that's not the part that I mean, you need to know that. But we had a saying, I had a professor that told us that in order to enter the quote unquote cavern, you must engage the corpus cavernosum. So that was a way to remember that it was for the erectile tissue. Now I'm going to look at our picture from the model next, and then look at these same structures. So this is the picture from the model. And some of the things you can't see, you're not going to be able to see the Vas Deferens, you're not going to be able to see the Seminal Vesicle and the Ampulla of the Vas Deferens, but it still has many of the things we need to look at. I will tell you, I'm not worried about the pubic symphysis or the symphysis pubis as a thing I'm going to ask. I'm not worried about that. So we start with the testes. Again, the testes are found in the scrotum. I will not use this picture on the model to label the epididymis. It's very hard to see the difference between the testes and the epididymis in this picture. But I do expect you to know the urinary bladder, pretty easy to see. Again, urinary bladder lined with transitional epithelium. I do think that it's fairly easy to see this gland called the prostate gland. And just a little FYI, it is not prostrate. There's no R in it. Prostrate means to bow. So it is the prostate gland. And you can see the brief little portion of the ejaculatory duct. Again, this is going to be the extension. On the other part of the model, you'll see that there's the seminal vesicle here. And as it joins where the two vas deferens come together. So this is the ejaculatory duct here, and it is joining this urethra. All right, so the urethra here is going to run through, and on this model, it's a little easier to see the difference between the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. Didn't mean to cross through that cavernosum there. The corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. So the corpus cavernosum is this purple band of tissue on top, and the corpus spongiosum is where the urethra comes through. So it is this area here. Now the corpus spongiosum, and I didn't mention this on the last picture, but the corpus spongiosum, as it extends down, will expand into what we call the glans penis. And this is basically the head of the penis. And it is an area of very sensitive nerve endings, obviously. Now, this is the picture that I was kind of talking about, the part of the model that shows the 3D version. And you can see this here. This is going to be the seminal vesicle. This is going to be the testes in the scrotum. This part right here is going to be the epididymis. And then this, as it extends out, this is the ductus or vas deferens. You can't see where they join the ampulla of it in this model, the way the picture is here, of course. But you can see the prostate gland. This is the outside of the urinary bladder. Again, probably wouldn't ask you that. The Glans Penis here, and just the general body of the penis. We're not able to see the corpus cavernosum or the spongy cavernosum, but those are some parts that you can see on this part of the model. One thing I didn't mention, and you can see it here on this, and you won't have to know this. There is a Spermatic Cord, and that is simply the band of all of these things. In it, we're going to have a vein and an artery. We're going to have the Ductus deferens. We're also going to have nervous tissue and some lymphatic tissue that is bundled in this cord that's going to extend into the scrotum. And so that is called the Spermatic Cord. But again, I'm not worried about that. We're not going to use that as part of the thing to label for the practical. Again, this is kind of having it where it's marked out where you can see the different parts. Now, this picture, I do want you to be able to kind of see. This is just a cross-section of the penis. I want you to be able to see that, and they use, fancy words here. This is corpus cavernosum here. And this is what I'm saying. The corpus cavernosum actually has two portions to it. So on either side, and remember the corpus cavernosum is the erectile tissue. On this, you can see the corpus spongiosum. The spongiosum is around, the corpus spongiosum is going to be around the urethra that runs through it. Now, you don't have to know it's called the spongy urethra for me. I just care that you know that's the urethra. And again, the urethra is mainly for urinating, and urine is mainly water. So you can kind of remember the spongiosum is the one that the urethra runs through.